Bible Nerd here. We are going through the stories of Holy Week, and we're now on to day 5, which is known as Holy Thursday, or you'll find the term Maundy Thursday as you're researching Holy Week and in the days of Holy Week. So I wanted to start there, and then we'll go on to other things that happen on this Thursday and even spill over to Friday, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But I want to first talk about and read the story of why we have this term Maundy Thursday that is in the Holy Week study. And this is where Jesus washes the feet of the disciples. So Maundy is a ceremonial name for feet washing or foot washing. So let's read the story in John. So if you go to John chapter 13, we'll start in the first verse and we'll read it right out of the gospel. Today I'm reading out of the New King James Version. So you may have a different version. Well, let's read through the story together. John chapter 13, verse 1. Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And the supper being ended, the devil, having already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, rose from supper and laid aside his garments, took a towel and girded himself. So you can just see that basically probably took off the garments of the supper and put on something a little bit lighter, and then would gird himself with a towel that he could use to dry. So he could wash the feet, then had a towel to also dry them. Let's continue reading here. After he had poured water into the basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel which he had girded, he then came to Simon Peter, and Peter said to him, Lord, are you washing my feet? Jesus answered and said to him, What I am doing you do not understand now, but you will know after this. Peter said to him, You shall never wash my feet. So you can see this interaction had a couple times. I mean, Peter knew that this was the Messiah, that this was the Lord, that this was the coming anointed one, the Messiah. So there's this sense of, whoa, you're not washing my feet. I mean, we see it today. Imagine if a leader of some religious group, or even just the mayor or the governor or the president came and started washing your feet. You're like, whoa, I'm supposed to wash yours. But Jesus always was trying to reverse this, always trying to turn it, that he came as a servant. We're supposed to serve others, that the first will be last, the last will be first. This concept that if you're not serving others, you're not close to the heart of God. So he answers in a great way here. He says, If I do not wash you, this is continuing in verse 8. Jesus answered him, If I do not wash you, you have no part with me. So what is Peter's reaction? Peter says, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my feet. So he goes from don't wash me at all to being like, wash all of me. And I think even Jesus pulled back and said, you're already bathed. We don't need to do the whole thing. We're doing your feet. There's a ceremonial part of just washing the feet, which also can remain dirty just throughout the day, more so than the rest of the body. So I really like how he focuses it back on what he's doing. So let's continue in the 12th verse. So when he had washed their feet, taken his garments, and sat down, he said to them, Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say well, for so am I. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly, I say to you, a servant is no greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. So that's where this Maundy Thursday kind of story plays out, is this idea that you're supposed to wash each other's feet, and it's really just being service to others. So there's so much symbolism that's in there, that no one is greater than the master. Master is not greater than the servants. The more we can serve each other, the better we'll all be, and the closer to the heart of God we will always be, if we're always serving others. And that's really the second great command. You should love your neighbor like yourself. So that's really what he's trying to play out in this particular story. So beautiful story there. So now, as we're continuing through the story of Holy Week, we get into a very common phrase known as the Last Supper. So let's go to some of the accounts of the Last Supper. Let's go to Matthew. So go to Matthew. Let me check my notes here. I think it's 26. Yep, chapter 26. And we'll read from that passage. Matthew chapter 26, starting in the 17th verse. Now on the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying to him, "Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?" And he said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.'" So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. When evening had come, he sat down with the 12. Now, as they were eating, he said, "Assuredly, I say to you, one of you will betray me." And they were exceedingly sorrowful, and each of them began to say to him, "Lord, is it I?" So this is still tying into that Judas betraying him. So yesterday was Spy Wednesday. If you watch that video, it kind of talks about when the first talk of maybe this is when Judas went and kind of talked with the religious leaders about turning Jesus over. Now it's the next day, most likely in the story, where he's actually called out that he's actually going to betray him. So let's keep continuing to read. So the disciples asked, "Who is it?" In verse 23, he answered and said, "He who dipped his hand with me in the dish will betray me. The Son of Man indeed goes just as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed." See, there's that Son of Man moniker again. We talked about that a couple of days ago. That's really the title that he mentioned is more than any other, the other titles that are given to him. Messiah, Son of God, Son of Man is really a title that he takes. It would be good for that man if he had not been born. Then Judas, who was betraying him, answered and said, "Rabbi, is it I?" He said to him, "You have said it." So then we go on to the actual Last Supper. So this little story kind of plays out in a little different order within the Gospels. But now let's go into the actual Last Supper. I want to read each account of this Last Supper. So let's read in the still chapter 26, verse 26 in Matthew. "And as they were eating, Jesus took bread, blessed, and broke it." So broke it is the idea of tearing it apart into pieces. That's what it is. But the word "broke it" there, I think, is very, very tied into what will happen to Jesus. So he's really kind of taking on this idea that he will be broken for the sins of the world. So let's continue to read. "He gave it to the disciples and said, 'Take, eat, this is my body.' He then took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, 'Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom.' And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives." So this is a shorter passage here in Matthew of what happened during the Last Supper. Was as they were, and this is during the Passover feast. So they're already doing some ceremonial things that were normal for the Israelites to do during Passover. But at one point, Jesus starts to implement these new practices. And it's Holy Communion is another name for it. Sabbath is another name for it. There's a couple names for this idea of taking on the bread, which represents his body, which is broken, which is torn and broken. So you'll see some denominations will take a little wafer or something and actually break it before they eat it. Others is just tearing some bread that's already prepared or just eating of some sort of bread. And then you'll see there is drinking of wine. A lot of times you'll see grape juice. You'll see something else that's in replace of that. But it's the idea of the ritual of saying, this is my body, this is my blood of the new covenant. Whenever you do this ceremony, think of Jesus and what he did. It's interesting. There's not necessarily how often you're supposed to do it, but it is something where a lot of churches over years have kind of come up with a time schedule of when they're going to honor this particular tradition. So now let's go on to, let's go to Mark. Got some notes over here. Let's go to Mark chapter 14. Let's read the similar passage in Mark. But again, there's just little different nuances in it that I think is important to read. So we're going to go to Mark chapter 14, starting in the 22nd verse. "And as they were eating, Jesus took bread, blessed, and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, 'Take, eat, this is my body.' Then he took the cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they all drank from it. And he said to them, 'This is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many. Assuredly, I say to you, I will no longer drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. So again, the same kind of concept, the same type of imagery of taking the bread, breaking it, feeding it, giving thanks. You can see right here, giving thanks to them. So he gives thanks and then does the blood, does the drink to be able to represent his blood, which is shed for many. So that's how you get the accounts of the Lord's Supper. Just beautiful imagery there, just beautiful reminders. I can't help that every time I take that, these passages kind of ring through my ears. And there's just this incredible thanks. There's just this incredible reconciliation that's happening through the blood of Christ to God the Father. That if it wasn't for what he did, I would not be in good standing with the Father. My sins would be holding me back from any reconciliation that I could possibly have, because I can't do it on my own, not without the blood of Jesus. So this is supposed to commemorate that. That's supposed to remind us of that incredible sacrifice that was made. And obviously it didn't mean as much to them until afterwards. So they realized there's so many things that Jesus did that they didn't realize till kind of after it was fulfilled and after his death and resurrection. Just absolutely beautiful passages. So now, the same night after the Last Supper, you're going to have the story of Garden of Gethsemane. So I also want to clarify something here. On the Israelite calendar, days started a little bit differently. Like here in the West and most of the world now, I believe, has the midnight to midnight is a calendar day. So Thursday starts at midnight and goes till midnight the next day. Well, in the Jewish culture, it was really more based on sundown, sunsets, on when days ended and stopped. So basically Thursday would have stopped at sunset. So technically some of this in their calendar is more like Friday morning, which for us would have been Thursday night. I hope that kind of makes sense. But it's the idea that when that sun goes down, that day ends. And then the next time it goes down, that's when that day ends. So some of this would actually be technically Friday. But I think as we look through the events and try to kind of put a story together that makes sense and to just break up everything that did happen on Friday, I want to just kind of include some of these events in our Thursday celebration or our Thursday observance of Holy Week. So let's continue to go on to the Garden of Gethsemane. This is just an incredibly rich, powerful story. So while we have the book of Mark open, let's stay in the book of Mark. So let's read in the chapters here. Let's back up just a little bit. So after the hymn and after the Last Supper, there's this story about how Peter is going to deny Jesus. So let's read that before we go into the garden, because that's actually in different orders here. But now that we're staying in Mark, let's talk about this real quick. Then Jesus said to them, all of you will be made to stumble because of me in this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. But after I have raised, I will go before you in Galilee. Peter said to him, even if all were made to stumble, yet I will not be. Jesus said to him, assuredly, I say to you today, even this night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. But he spoke more vividly, if I have to die because of you, I will not deny you. And they all said likewise. So this is where there's a little bit of different stories about how many roosters crowed, how many, the 3 times is pretty consistent that he'll deny him 3 times. But when the rooster crowed is a really interesting talking point, because it just says before the rooster crows in 1, before it crows 3 times. So there's an idea that but I don't really know if that matters. I see so many people that stumble on that part, but really you're laying the groundwork here that this really staunch, just real big supporter of Jesus vividly denies the fact that he'll ever deny him. And as we know in the story, he ends up denying him. But there's some beautiful things that happen when he is raised, that the angel says, that he's going on to Galilee, tell all the disciples, and Peter, he singles him out. You got to figure after this denial, there's some heartbrokenness there that may not be solved. And I mean, there's a great story with that. We'll get into that as that event transpires. But here's where it lays down the groundwork that not only does Jesus know he will deny him 3 times, but just how much Peter's love is showing up here, and then how he ends up denying him 3 times. So we'll go over that in a moment. All right, so now let's go into the Garden of Gethsemane. So this is just a very powerful part of this whole story. And you start seeing that Jesus hasn't gone to bed yet. So we've got the We've got the supper, the foot washing, the supper. Then you've got the Garden of Gethsemane, which is just a powerful, powerful part of Scripture. Then he gets arrested, betrayed, and all the other stuff. So he hasn't slept. He hasn't done anything. This is really starting to ramp up the crucifixion. All right, so let's go to the Garden of Gethsemane, chapter 14 in Mark. Then they came to a place which was named Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." And he took Peter, James, and John with him, and he began to be troubled and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch." He went a little further and went on the ground and prayed, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, "Abba," which is another name for Father, "all things are possible for you. Take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will." Then he came and found them sleeping. So he goes, after he prays that, he goes back to the disciples, find that they're sleeping. Now, they haven't slept either. They did the Passover feast. They did all this stuff. They've been up all day, probably, since the beginning of the day. Now it's getting late into this Thursday, into technically Friday. Like I said, it's kind of their calendar. So you can see that they're probably starting to fall asleep. They've had some wine. They've had some food. They're probably starting to get sleepy as it's getting darker and later in the night. Then he says, going into the 37th verse, then he came and found them sleeping and said to Peter, "Simon, are you sleeping? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Incredible saying right there. Again, he went away. So this is Jesus. Again, he went away and prayed and spoke the same words. And when he returned, he found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. Then he came the third time and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Is it enough? The hour has come. Behold, the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. See, my betrayer is at hand." So that's the account in Mark. Just a beautiful passage here where he knows what's coming. He knows the pain that is coming. He knows what's coming, and it's only human. It's only natural to say, "Hey, can this pass for me?" I think it's very natural, but nevertheless, your will be done. The goodness of what this event will happen will far outweigh the negative. And that's why you can hear the moniker of Good Friday, even though some of the stuff that happens on Friday is not good at all. But it's the idea that God always turns beauty from ashes. And this is probably one of the more ashy things, one of the more horrible things that you can go through, the crucifixion, the things that Jesus goes through, the flogging. I mean, we'll get to that, but I mean, it's just so powerful that he was able to turn that into what he turned it into. All right, let's go back to Matthew. I want to read that same account right here. So we got the same account of Peter's denial. This is in chapter 26 of Matthew, starting in the 31st verse. You had that similar passage about Peter will not deny Jesus. So let's go to chapter 26 of Matthew, starting in the 36th verse. It's the same prayer in the garden. There's a little bit of details, a little nuance that's added to this as well. So let's read through that together. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to the disciples, "Sit here while I go and pray over there." And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me." He went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, "O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping and said to Peter, "What? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again, a second time, he went away and prayed, saying, "O my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done." And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them, went away again, and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to his disciples and began and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." So there is the same, very, very similar to what you see in the account of Mark. There are little nuances in there. And I just think it's just such a beautiful commitment. Again, we've talked about just such a beautiful commitment. So let's go to Luke. There's even more in Luke. So we are going to go, let's see, it is Luke chapter 22. So I got my notes over here. So let's go to Luke chapter 22. Okay, here we go. 22. We got Peter's denial again. So if you go 22, 31 through 34, that same thing that Peter says that he will not deny Jesus, but will deny him. I believe this one says a little bit differently. This one says, I tell you, Peter, the rooster shall not crow this day before you will deny me 3 times that you know me. So a little different reference to when this rooster will crow, but obviously it's early in the morning, and it's something where he'll do it 3 times even before the day really gets going. I think that's part of the symbolism of why a rooster, if you've been around farms or anything, you know, they can kind of crow at different times. Usually the first time they crow is kind of that beginning of the day. So he's saying the day's not even going to start really, you know, the sun's not even going to get up in the air. Because again, their day started before that. It started the night before, but really the sun hasn't even started to rise. The day hasn't really gotten going yet, and you've already denied me 3 times. Now, whether the rooster crows 2 or 3 times, I don't think that's the point. I think it's really the idea that the daylight hasn't even started and you've already denied me 3 times. Yet you have such a strong denial that you never will, even to death, he says. All right, so let's go on to the prayer in the garden. So this is that same Garden of Gethsemane story. This is recorded in the book of Luke. So we'll go to chapter 22, starting in the 39th verse. Coming out, he went to the Mount of Olives as he was accustomed, and his disciples also followed him. When he came to the place, he said to them, pray that you may not enter into temptation. And he withdrew for them about a stone's throw. That's the first reference about how far. So he goes a little bit away from them to do the praying. And he knelt down and prayed, saying, Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Then an angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Then his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. When he rose up from prayer, he had come to his disciples. He found them sleeping from sorrow. Then he said, why do you sleep? Rise and pray, lest you enter into temptation. So this is the account here that many people see when they talk about the Garden of Gethsemane, that he was so literally stressed to the point of death. It says that many different times, that his sweat became like drops of blood falling to the ground. Now, I've had some people that have said that this is when the sins of the world were placed on him in the garden. I don't believe that's probably the most accurate. I think it's more the human stress of this, knowing what was coming and the pain. I mean, the crucifixion is an incredibly painful way to die. It's a Roman torture instrument. And I've had people that you read that say that Jesus really didn't die. And that is unbelievably false, because the Romans were professional killers. In fact, some of the most brutal men were placed in those divisions to be able to handle and just humiliate and really put on display, if you were opposed to Rome, what would happen to you. It's a horrible, horrible torture device. And there's some stories about what they did to people, because Jesus wasn't the only one crucified. There was 2 others next to him, but there was lots of crucifixions as a public display of torture and Roman power to make sure that you didn't step out of line, or could be your fate. And it's throughout history, there's been some form of staking people on poles. And I mean, it is definitely a political device, and it's also a torture device, and it's made to inflict as much pain as humanly possible. And even before that, they try to beat the victims by flogging to within an inch of their life, like as close, so they were alive for as long as possible before they even enter into crucifixion. So we'll get into that, obviously, when the crucifixion happens, which is tomorrow. But this is that account where you hear about how sorrowful Jesus really was, to the point where he was literally bleeding drops of blood. I've seen some medical stories of people that have been so stressed that would happen. I mean, it's obviously very rare. It's a rare condition, but it's something where it's incredible anxiety, incredible pain, to the point where it physically manifests, to the point where you actually can bleed blood. So let's go on to the next part of this. And this is, so as the Garden of Gethsemane happens, and as he's ending, kind of coming out the 3rd time, or coming out to meet with his disciples, Judas and a bunch of other people from probably the religious leaders and some of their people had come out to be able to capture Jesus when he wasn't out speaking. There's so many days leading up to this that he was talking with people and in the temple courts and probably around in the city during the Passover celebrations. So it is something where they never had really a chance to kind of capture him because everybody was there just marveling at what he was saying. So they had to kind of get him at night, and that's where Judas helped them to find where he could be captured without being captured in front of all the other people. So let's stay here in Luke. This is mentioned in all the Gospels. You have it in Matthew, Mark, and John. So let's go on to this. This is the betrayal and the arrest in Gethsemane. So we'll start in the 47th verse again in Luke chapter 22. And while he was still speaking, so as he was talking to his disciples after he come out of Gethsemane, behold, a multitude. And he who was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them and drew near to Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said to him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? When those around him saw what was going to happen, they said to him, Lord, shall we strike with the sword? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus answered and said, Permit even this. And he touched his ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, captains of the temple, and elders who had come to him, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs? When I was with you daily in the temple, you did not try to seize me, but in this hour and the power of darkness. So again, it talks about, hey, you had the chance to get me. Why now? Why like a thief? Why like a robber? Why so clandestine that you're doing it at the power of darkness? So he kind of calls them out that, hey, you had a chance to do this. Why are you doing it now? So let's go to the other accounts in the other Gospels. We've got, how about we go back to Matthew? Let's go back to Matthew. Right here, let's read the account in Matthew. And while he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, with the great multitude, with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now his betrayer had given them a sign, saying, Whomever I kiss, he is the one, seize him. Immediately he went up to Jesus and said, Greetings, Rabbi, and kissed him. But Jesus said to him, Friend, why have you come? Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And suddenly one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword, struck the servant of the high priest, and cut off his ear. But Jesus said to him, Put your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. For do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he provide me with more than 12 legions of angels? How then could the scriptures be fulfilled, that it must happen thus? So great. It just shows you, Jesus could have called angels from heaven to stop this whole thing at any time. He really had and that's why it's known as the Passion. That's why he took this on himself. Now, he even was to the point where, hey, if this can pass another way, great. But if not, your will be done. If there's no other way. And I think we look around the world and there's so many times we wonder why Jesus or God doesn't do anything sometimes. And I just look at because the existence of that thing must be greater to serve God's purpose than the absence of it. Because if it was gone, one, wouldn't know about it, and two, it wouldn't serve his purpose. So it all is designed to point back to him. We don't know necessarily what we're going through, the pain and the struggles that we're going through. But I think most of us have gone through a trial. Most of us have gone through it, look back at how much it strengthened us, how much it brought us closer to God, and how much good actually came from it. And we wouldn't take it back. That's the most disciplined response to all this, is trusting God, the will of God. Let's keep reading here. So we'll go to the 55th verse. In that hour, Jesus said to the multitudes, Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I sat with you daily, teaching in the temple, and you did not seize me. But all this was done that the scriptures and prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. This is that moment where all the shepherds are scattered, and it's predicted that they would all scatter and run now that he's being actually captured. Let's go to the Mark account. So this is Mark 14. Let's go through this one here. Okay, so we'll go right here. This is Mark 14, chapter 14, verse 43. Mark 14, starting in the 43rd verse. And immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, and the great multitude with swords and clubs came from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. Now his betrayer had given them a signal, saying, "Whoever I kiss, he is the one. Seize him and lead him away safely." As soon as he had come, immediately he went up to him and said to him, "Rabbi, Rabbi," and kissed him. Then they laid their hands on him and took him. And one of those who stood by drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Then Jesus answered and said to them, "Have you come out as against a robber with swords," page there, "swords and clubs to take me? I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me, but the scripture must be fulfilled." Then they all forsook him and fled. So this is where everybody took off and fled. So now we're going to go on to the last story that, again, this is where it ties a little bit into Friday, but I wanted to break this up and kind of put this into kind of Thursday night that's leading into Friday. And we'll talk about those things, obviously, on Good Friday. So here is where Jesus then faces the religious leaders of the time, and they have kind of this mock trial for him. This is also the point where Jesus ends up being denied by Peter. So let's stay here. We're in Mark. Let's stay in Mark in chapter 14 and starting in the 53rd verse. And they led Jesus away to the high priest, and with him were assembled all the chief priests and the elders and the scribes. I find that an interesting little tidbit there, that they knew obviously this was going to happen. It's late in the night. Passover's already happened. So now they're starting to have this big meeting, knowing that they were going to be able to bring Jesus into this trial, if you will, this sham court late in the night. But Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and sat with the servants and warmed himself by the fire. Now the chief priests and all the council sought testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. For many bore false witness against him, but their testimonies did not agree. So you can see whatever they brought in, the stories weren't matching up. They just weren't making sense. They weren't finding the evil they were trying to find in him, because so much of it didn't actually bear witness to what Jesus was saying and doing. Let's keep reading. Now the chief priests, let's go down to verse 57. And they rose up and bore false witness against him, saying, "We heard him say, I will destroy this temple made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands." But not even then did their testimonies agree. So you can see they came, well, he didn't really say he was going to build it. He said that it was going to crumble down and all the stones would be removed. It wasn't something where they could really pin him down that he actually said what they're trying to say here, because people would say, well, that's not exactly what he said. Well, that's not what he meant. That, you could see that they almost started arguing with each other, or the testimonies just didn't match. So it's just a really interesting part right here. The high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, saying, "Do you answer nothing? What of it these men testify against you?" But he kept silent and answered nothing. Again, there's some prophetic things about there that he didn't answer for a reason. There's some really prophetic things there. Again, the high priest asked him, saying to him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" And Jesus said, "I am. And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven." This right here, the reaction of the high priest, is really what pushes everybody over the edge. That finally they all could hear this blaspheme of taking on this moniker of the Son of Man in the prophecies in Daniel, and even going back to Adam and Eve, the snake crusher would come from Eve and be a son of man. That would be this character, this prophetic person that would sit right there, sitting at the right hand of the power. They didn't have a God that would actually be made of cast in stone and iron. That's not what the Israelites did. They would have the ark, and then sitting above it was God. So if someone sat on that seat, on that throne, that would be God in the flesh. So he is taking on the moniker of Son of Man, which is saying, "I am God in the flesh." That's what that would have meant to an Israelite, to the point where, what was their reaction? When he said that, hadn't said anything, he's getting accused of all this stuff sitting there, and he finally says, "I am," which already is a big statement. "But you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "What further need do we have of this witness? You have heard the blaspheme. What do you think?" And they all condemned him to be deserving of death. That just was the nail in the coffin, if you will. That was the final thing, that just all the other evidence was kind of not there. And then all of a sudden he comes out and makes that statement. And that is what ends it, just puts it done. Then some began to spit on him and to bind him and beat him and say to him, prophesy. And the officers struck him with the palms of their hands. So let's keep reading on to Peter's denial of Jesus. Now as Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came. And when she saw Peter warming himself, she looked at him and said, you were also with Jesus of Nazareth. But he denied it, saying, I neither know nor understand what you're saying. And he went out to the porch, and the rooster crowed. And the servant girl saw him again, and began to say to those who stood by, this is one of them. But he denied it again. And a little later, those who stood by said to Peter again, surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean, and your speech shows it. So his dialect, his that's what kind of gave him away that he was from Galilee. Is he just had a slur, he just had a speech that was slightly different that just gave away your location. Just like if you heard somebody from the South, you kind of would know kind of the area or the region they're from, or somebody from New Jersey or California. We all have kind of these dialects. And so they could easily just say, hey, you're not from around here. You're not from Jerusalem. You're from Galilee. Then he began to curse and swear, I do not know this man of whom you speak. The second time the rooster crowed. Then Peter called to mind the words that Jesus had said to him, before the rooster crowed twice, you will deny me 3 times. So it's just unbelievable here. And then this is how Peter reacts. And when he thought about it, he wept. The word here in Hebrew and the word that's written in these dialects, it's not just weeping. It is an unbelievable, sorrowful, heartbreaking type situation that just fled, that he just literally denied the person that he knew was the Savior, and sat there and denied him to the point where he didn't put up his life. He didn't do anything to stop or do anything to be able to intercede with this. One of the last disciples to even be there. Everybody else fled before this. When he was captured in the garden, Peter goes all the way to this particular point, but then he too also turns away. So everyone leaves the shepherd. Nobody sticks around for what's going to happen later for Jesus. Nobody stands up and does any of these things. So just a powerful scripture. It's just incredibly powerful. So let's go to, I want to go to one more account. Let's go to, that was Mark. Let's go to Matthew. I want to go back to Matthew. And there's a little nuances in here, and then we will wrap it up for today. So let's go back to Matthew chapter 26, starting in the 57th verse. And those who had laid hold of Jesus led him away to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed at a distance to the high priest's courtyard, and he went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests and elders and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found nothing. But at last 2 false statements came before and said, this fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. This is definitely one of the big ones that kind of pushed him over. That wasn't just a blasphemy against God, but it was also destroying of the temple. So there's definitely some imagery that's there that they wanted to play on. And the high priest arose and said to him, do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you? But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest answered and said to him, I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are Christ, the Son of God. Jesus said to them, it is as you have said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his clothes, saying, he has spoken blasphemy. What further need do you have of this witness? Look now, you have heard his blaspheme. What do you think? That reaction of him taking on that claim of being the Son of Man was, for an Israelite, was a very, very big deal, especially with everything else he did and all the other things he was saying. This wasn't just somebody else trying to act like a Messiah. There'd been this Messiah uproars and things that happened before Jesus. There's even a few that were pretty close to these events, maybe even a year or two before. And there's even times in the seasons like the Passover that probably the zealots would kind of rally up a little bit more during these types of religious experiences. The exiles and so many things that are in their history would kind of rally up somebody to try to take on these monikers, but everybody fell short. Everybody fell short of what Jesus was able to accomplish. So I know that was a long one today. There's just so much going on. Take some time to read these stories as we lead into Good Friday, which will be tomorrow. But I just think it's so incredibly beautiful. I just love studying this stuff, going back to the different accounts. Let me know what you thought. Please comment, subscribe, like below. I really enjoy going through these journeys and talking these out with you and heading into the reason for our faith. This whole week is really the reason that we believe that Jesus was who he said he was, the Son of Man. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and God bless you this holy week. And again, click, like, subscribe. Let me know what I got right, what I got wrong, anything you've heard about these stories. Love to have a dialect and love to talk to you about it. So again, God bless. Have a wonderful day.